Welcome friends to my first comic video. Now, I know I promised other videos, but this is just one of those things that it gets stuck in my head and I kind of have to make a video or else I won't get it out. So this video is going to be talking about adaptations from the medium of books, anime, manga, and comics to the actual animated motion, silver screens, and stuff like that. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to do with Bleach, but I do think it is important to talk about adaptations and how some things need to be changed or are changed to reach a larger demographic to help the product grow and for companies to actually make money, because at the end of the day, these are business decisions, and oftentimes that trumps our love or the love of the actual project. Not all the time, but sometimes. So before we get into it, I want to talk about the criteria for what I consider a good character to be. This is important going into this because I'm going to be talking about characters and how they're made and adapted. First, motivation. Motivation is highly important for me. Having a cohesive motivation. It doesn't need to be complex, just coherent. And it doesn't have to be the same throughout a story. It can change as long as the actual change makes sense and is shown. There's an important aspect of show, don't tell. Next up is aesthetic. Do you walk it like you talk it? Does your clothes, lifestyle, mannerisms align with your character and motivation? This concept of character design and character creation became very important to me as I read Bleach. Because when you look at the characters, their story, past, their future is all also told through their design and character clothes. I never used to think it was that important, but if your character doesn't act and talk like the King of Hueco Mundo, then he's not the King of Hueco Mundo. And finally, character fulfillment. You have to fulfill your role as a character in whatever form it takes. This could be being an antagonist and actually antagonizing your protagonist, or a protagonist who actively or sometimes even just ends up the opposite of the antagonist. And you have to complete your role as such. You cannot fulfill your role, but be a literary example. Just to give you an example of someone who doesn't necessarily fulfill the role as a Hashira from the Demon Slayer series, Rengoku. Rengoku was destined for greatness, but died early as an example of consequence and tragedy. So he's still a good, cohesive, solid character because he meets every single criteria. So now, let's get into the video. First, we're going to talk about Thanos and his adaptation from the comic books to movie. Oftentimes, when comic books are adapted into new mediums, they are just that, adapted. This is done to appeal to more than just the original demographic. That isn't necessarily a bad thing. Some of my favorite characters or character changes came from these adaptations. Terry McGinnis from the Batman Beyond TV series. He wasn't even actually a comic character, but the concept of the Batman in Gotham was adapted to match a more 90s modern audience. The next Avengers Heroes of Tomorrow movie, the actual concept of the Avengers having kids, great adaptations, great new characters made, and it worked. My favorite portrayal of Tony Stark is from that movie. General Zod and the Kryptonians in Man of Steel. I love them. It's my favorite iteration of Zod throughout any comic, throughout any movie. And the Kryptonians, I think the depth in which they're given some shine is amazing. These adaptations are departures from their originals, yet still great. But then adaptations can go awry. When Disney Marvel attempted to bring Thanos to the big screen, they needed to make the character more palatable for a large audience. I personally love the comic motivation for Thanos, despite not liking the character. Originally, it was all a product of his infatuation with Lady Death, a love he wished to demonstrate by collecting the Infinity Gems to become a supreme being who would be worthy of her love. However, this only displeased her because in the end, he became a being higher than her. And this is probably the only concept I like about the Mad Titan. He is a genius-level psychopathic killer who is infatuated with the personification of death, who is, for the most part, aloof to his affections. There are real-world examples of serial killers with this exact or similar dynamic. In my honest opinion, this is a convincing and interesting motivation. A convincing motivation that he backs up with every comic and with every word. Now, people will tell you that he has the same motivation in the comics as he does as his cinema counterpart, but that is not true. They will cite a Silver Surfer comic, Silver Surfer 35 if I remember correctly, that is misinterpreted to fit that narrative. Thanos gave Silver Surfer a speech to distract Silver Surfer in the comic, and Thanos states the desire to half the universe population because people bad. But Silver Surfer at the time was an unknowing vector for a bacteria that would kill the people on the planet that Thanos just took him to. This was Thanos' plan. Thanos does not actually care about population control. This was also Silver Surfer's first meeting with the Mad Titan. Thanos was returned back to life by Death's minions so that she could continue her steady harvest of human or just life's souls. That's the only motivation he has. Thanos is not some lovable eco-terrorist. This was all just for lulz in this comic. What's funnier is the snap half the universe away wasn't his idea in the first place, it was Lady Death's. But when adapting it to Disney Marvel's new target audience, they wanted a more relatable villain, as was the trend, but also keep the cool, amazing comic book feat of snapping half of the universe away. So they baked the snap into his actual motivation, going from psychopath to eco-terrorist. But as many have pointed out, the eco-terrorist idea of cutting the universal population in half makes no sense. It is heralded as cold practicality and pragmatism with a pinch of genius, when it's actually none of those things. It doesn't solve the problem in the short term because there are too many variables about population to consider, and cutting it in half, as well as their resources, doesn't guarantee a minimalist lifestyle. Destroying half of resources could cause immediate collapse in certain ecological situations, or people may fight harder due to lowered resources and a vacuum of power. Nor is it a long-term solution because the problem of too many people, too little resources may be a logistical problem or lack of proper allocation, not necessarily population. Not to mention they can always multiply again. The biggest problem, though, isn't the fact that his plan is flawed, because no plan is perfect, and villains are usually wrong, as is their nature. It's about being convincing. I don't believe someone with his brain could ever come to that conclusion. I'm not convinced that it makes sense with how the character is in the movie. He doesn't meet the second character criteria. I'm not trashing the eco-terrorist angle either. Eco-terrorism as a villain motivation can be done right. Ra's al Ghul has lived lifetimes and seen humanity's lack of moral progress in his own eyes and self-destructive tendencies. So he plans to destroy and kill those in power who lead these people, as to create power vacuums for him to fill and direct humanity to what he deems the better path. But he can't see how much the Lazarus pits have twisted his mind. I can believe a man of extreme intelligence who is addicted to a fountain of youth that maddens him would come to such a frankly sterile conclusion. I don't believe a competent scientist like Thanos and tactical genius that he shows could ever come to that conclusion. Too many people bad, cut in half. I'm a big proponent of show, don't tell. And at no point does the movie ever show us that the man is unhinged. Him having the plan itself does not mean he's unhinged. I don't believe they did a good job of getting me from point A to point B. The reason, in my opinion, that this was a bad adaptation or one that I didn't like was because I feel like the core of Thanos was lost and forgotten. Now, I'm not just going to sit here and criticize. I think there was a better route to take. I think a better route would have been Isaac or Dracula from the Castlevania series. You could do the Isaac route if you weren't worried about, upsetting the 13-year-olds and their moms. You could have done the Isaac route, talking about slavery, abuse, and things like this, and showing that he has given up on sentient life. Or you could have taken the more, I would say, friendly route of Dracula's being hurt so much by humanity that he's lashing out. Either one of those routes I think would have been better, and you still could have kept in line with the concept of Thanos without losing the actual madness within the character. Now, this next section is going to be an adaptation that was, I believe, good, but not necessarily popular. Now, this may seem boring, but I'm opening Batman's section with an explanation of restorative justice versus retributive justice. Restorative justice focuses on the rehabilitation of the offender, victim healing, and the reparations of harm caused. Retributive justice, on the other hand, focuses on punishment, one that is suitable and proportionate to the crime committed. Remember that word, proportionate. Our current system in the United States uses mostly retribution as a medium for justice. Batman is the exploration of restorative versus retributive justice. Batman in the comics seeks to heal all parties involved, but his media portrayal makes it seem as if he's only ever laying down the retributive hammers of justice, usually under specific writers. And often people think the core of Batman's character is his I don't kill code, but that isn't the core of the Batman, at least in my opinion. The core of the Batman is rehabilitation. The Batman persona is a way for Bruce's mind to cope with the trauma of losing his parents and his innocence. The Batman isn't just the manifestation of Bruce's fear that he then uses to brutalize criminals. No, it's deeper than that. The Batman persona is a creation by Bruce in order to gain some level of restorative justice to not only Gotham, but himself. Batman was created to right the wrong of his parents' death and by extension ending crime. By ending crime, it would not only give him catharsis in regards to righting that wrong, but showing that anyone can be saved. Because if someone as tortured as Bruce can do some good, then in his mind, anyone can. Or, put in a familiar way, we've all had one bad day, but we can overcome that day. However, the Batman itself is the broken psyche. He's not what you would call a picture of perfect mental health, and people with good mental health break. He is not beyond killing. The rage, guilt, and powerlessness that the Batman exudes is not stable. It's commented on multiple times throughout generations of comics. And in Batman vs. Superman, you can see the Batman is driving the car, so to speak. You can hear it in Alfred's commentary about the Batman.
New rules.
We're criminals, Alfred. We've always been criminals. Nothing's changed.
Yes, it has, sir. Everything's changed. Men fall from the sky. The gods hurl thunderbolts. Innocents die. That's how it starts, sir. Beaver, the rage, the feeling of powerlessness that turns good men cruel.
You can hear it in Bruce's voice outside of the suit.
You're gonna go to war. That son of a bitch brought the war to us 2 years ago. Jesus, Alfred, count the dead. Thousands of people. What's next? Millions?
Those emotions are what drives him to be the best, to always be in control, to have the power, because the first time he ever felt the effects of powerlessness, it left him mentally marred. The Batman could at any point cross that line. He is human, just like the rest of us. Batman has crossed that line in comics before. His original iteration, how the creators envisioned the character of Batman, he did kill. In later comics, after he famously adopted this new stance of no killing, he attempted to cross that line several times and either failed, was stopped, or pulled back at the last second, but he was fully committed to killing someone in front of him. Most of the time it's the Joker. Why? Because he's human. For me, the best way to adapt a character is to explore these avenues of a Batman who ventures beyond his narrow worldview. And I don't mean just in killing, these could be done in other ways. For example, Batman Beyond explores this well with not just a neo-Gotham created in the wake of Batman, but what happens to an old Bruce who can't do the job anymore and almost takes a life with a gun. Did he wallow in his cave? Yes. Did he give up? Kinda. Did he come back? Yes. And that's exactly what Batfleck is. It's a Bruce Wayne Batman that has fallen, not too dissimilar from the Dark Knight comic that everyone loves. A beautiful lie, a character who could stop crime, gives up but comes back because he does not lose faith in humanity or regains it. A dream of saving a little boy in an alleyway from a punk with a gun. After losing so many people to the streets of Gotham and enduring the loss of a child and friends, one day gods just fall from the sky and create the most monumental paradigm shift in human history. This is the story of Batman vs. Superman. Buried in that paradigm shift is Wayne Tower and all its employees, friends, co-workers, children. Innocents, all with Bruce's name on it, and Superman's. Bruce doesn't have the vantage point of knowing Clark like we do. On top of all that, he has seen what one bad day has done to regular men like the Joker, or people like Killer Croc and Harley Quinn. He's built an armored suit for fighting someone else in that universe, so he's had major battles and seen what regular people can do. The difference between Superman and those regular people is he is a god who can wipe out the entirety of humanity with very little effort. What actually has value when beings like that exist? What difference does it make to fighting crime when a man like Superman exists, and now you've given up on the concept of humanity itself? Watch Twin Perfect's Batman motivation video. At the 2034 mark, he explains why stopping Superman is critical to a logical mind like Batman's, and it's done in great detail. Also, his hatred of Superman was exacerbated by Lex's genius plan in that movie and Barry's time meddling. With all that, you can see how the Batman concludes that this is the right alley to go through. So why should he give consideration to criminals? If they choose to use lethal force, then they only deserve what they deal out. Their punishment will be equal to their crime, like I said earlier. But remember, Batfleck doesn't actively seek to kill them. Lethal force is met with lethal force. Trading women like property, stealing their freedom, beating them, then Batman is going to bruise, batter you, and take away your freedom in kind. The warehouse scene is a microcosm of this. He doesn't kill everyone, just those whose deaths were unavoidable. If I throw this crate, move. If you pull the pin on the grenade and I knock you down, you're responsible for what happens to you and everyone near that grenade. Same thing when he was shooting back with the bat plane at the people who were shooting at him. Gone were the days of hitting a henchman one time in the face and he was out for 5 hours. There is a necessity in the character and within the live action adaptation. Later, we see the character change to wanting to restore humanity, and not only himself, but the world. A movie about him falling and rising again. That is the Batman. Now, there is a way to not do the Batman, and for me, that's Michael Keaton's version. The merciless and almost joyful killing of people with a smile on your face is not the way to go. Especially when you're trying to separate him from the other killers in that movie who look just like him, who act just like him. You know, Danny's Penguin, Walken's Falcone, and Jack's Joker. They're all the same. I don't really have any other criticisms to levy at that movie. There are, I could, but this video is long enough, so I'm cutting it right here. Thank you all for watching. I know this isn't my usual content, but like I said, this kind of got in my head and I just had to get it out so that I could work on my other videos. Promise next week's video will be a Bleach one. I hope you enjoyed this. This I still believe was topical because I am talking about literature to the motion medium and how important it is to draft the core characters, and that's going to be important coming up for the Bleach anime. We as Bleach fans have never really had this problem, but the Fullmetal Alchemist fandom had this issue when the original anime aired instead of Brotherhood. So, y'all have a good day. Love y'all. Bye.